Welcome. My name is Rebecca. I will be walking you through these slides. We're going to be talking about ethics and boundaries and how they provide us with guidelines for building and maintaining positive and professional relationships. This training will be discussing and reviewing professional ethics and boundaries. We'll be defining them and kind of exploring what all of that means. This training is meant to support staff, volunteers, community partners, and families that Vital Villages works with. There will be a quiz for this training. Let's get started. What are ethics? Social workers, therapists, doctors, and other professionals conduct their work under the guidelines set by their licensing board. While the wording might be different, the premise is the same. Ethics are a way of supporting healthy and helpful relationships and maintaining professional dynamics. Using ethics, we can establish a code of conduct that protects people being served from exploitation. Additionally, understanding ethics can support decision-making professionally and personally. What are ethics based on? Ethics are based on a series of principles, and the first one is the promotion of health and welfare, to do no harm. We consider autonomy and self-determination when we are considering our actions. Fidelity is our behavior or action, or are our actions governed by faithfulness? Do we keep promises? Are our practices equitable and fair? And are our practices truthful? Are we transparent with and follow through with what we say we're going to do? The 4 pillars of ethics: autonomy. That's the respect for the person's right to self-determination. The client has a right to consent to care. The client has a right to confidentiality, as well as privacy regarding their care. They also have a right to access their records that pertain to their care. Beneficence. The duty to do good and promote the well-being of others. Non-malfeasance, the duty to not do bad, cause no harm, and intentionally avoid harming or injuring others. And justice, to treat all people equally and equitably and provide fair support for the person served, taking their needs and barriers to resources into account. Equitable services does not necessarily mean equal. What are ethical dilemmas? These are some of the things that you will see in your own life. You've probably already had some experiences with these. So autonomy versus beneficence. When the client's right to know and consent to treatment conflicts with our duty to do good. Confidentiality versus self-harm. You can see how if a person has a right to confidentiality, but they are disclosing that they are causing harm to themselves, there's a duty to report. Confidentiality versus third-party harm is the person who has the right to confidentiality making threats that they're going to harm somebody else. This dilemma, we have to weigh it, like what's who's safe, and do we report that? These dilemmas don't often have easy answers, and consultation is really helpful in helping to figure out the solution to some of these dilemmas. Boundaries versus personal disclosures. Informed consent and expediency. Self-care versus client care. And then cultural sensitivity issues. And we will get into these more as we explore these slides, so just stick around. Okay, cultural sensitivity. Understand your assumptions and biases. Implicit bias is a form of bias that occurs automatically and unintentionally, that nevertheless affects judgments, decisions, and behaviors. We all have conditioning that kind of creates an implicit bias regarding other cultures or other experiences. We all have them. We all have ideas and assumptions about age, disability, ability, gender identity, sexuality, ethnicity, language, cultural identity, race, weight, education, etc., etc. Under implicit bias, we are unaware that our biases, rather than objective facts, affect our decisions and judgments. For example, when most people hear the words kindergarten teacher, they are more likely to picture a female, often a young female. This can happen without intention or awareness and may even contradict openly held beliefs. And you are encouraged to go to implicit.harvard.edu and explore some of those tests. That might be on the quiz. Processing for working out ethical dilemmas. So there's a process. If there is a dilemma, like one of these that we saw on this slide, there's a system for figuring out what the right thing to do is, or the best decision that causes the least amount of harm. Sometimes there is no right thing. So one, self-reflection. Ask yourself, is what I'm doing for the benefit of me, or is my focus on the person I'm serving? Get consultation. Ask a colleague about the dilemma. Be sure to maintain privacy protocol and avoid gossip. The third step in this process, this can be interchangeable with the second step. Consult with your supervisor, manager, or lead. Develop a plan for moving forward or for repairing the rupture. And then if there has been a rupture in the relationship, if they disclosed something and you had to report it and that caused a problem, repair when or if necessary. Collaborate with a client and address any ethical or boundary violations as soon as possible. If it doesn't cause additional harm. Keep that in mind. If your apology or attempt to repair is going to cause additional harm, we might want to wait a little bit. Together with the person you're serving, develop an understanding of what went wrong and how to avoid it in the future. Take accountability for what happened and commit to doing something different in the future. Okay, we're going to move into boundaries because they are so closely related to ethics. We'll get a little mixed up here in some of these slides. So similar to ethics, good boundaries provide a safe place for building and maintaining positive interactions and relationships with colleagues, community partners, and families being supported by vital villages. Boundaries can help avoid misunderstandings, conflict, stress, misconduct, and harm. Why are boundaries important? Again, like ethics, they provide a framework with which we conduct our professional and personal lives. Our boundaries shift and change depending on the situation and our obligations. Boundaries help us avoid misunderstandings, conflict, stress, misconduct, or harm to the people being served. Boundaries support sustainable mental health for the person served, as well as the person providing services. Boundaries are a secret weapon against burnout. Knowing what your limits are, knowing what your strengths are, and knowing how to manage your tasks around those can really help prevent fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout. Understanding power dynamics. The people being served by vital villages have experienced trauma and likely perceived mistreatment by people in authority. You as a volunteer or service provider will be perceived as having power in this dynamic. As the person in power, you have an obligation to understand ethics, boundaries, and how to avoid causing harm accidentally. As a person in power, you also have the privilege of modeling how to set and maintain appropriate limits with colleagues and people being supported. We should always maintain an awareness of this dynamic and filter our actions, statements, and limits through that lens. Self-reflection. How do we know when we need to set a boundary or a boundary has been violated? We might feel confused or strange about an encounter. Oh, that was weird. We might start feeling resentful. Developing a practice of self-reflection can support changes as they're needed. Ask yourself after an encounter or at the end of the day, how did that go? Do I need to alter anything? Did I do that well? Do I need additional support in any areas? Am I confused or do I feel weird about an exchange? Why? Why do I feel weird? Goldilocks zone. So we're going to talk about like engagement, one-on-one direct service. Is there a perfect level of involvement with people being supported? I think there is. Overly helpful or overly involved, that would be somebody that was too close, too empathetic, too personal, too involved in the person's life. That is categorically unethical. We need to maintain some pretty professional boundaries, and we'll get into that in the just right part. Under-involved or under-helpful, lack of awareness and empathy for the person's stated and unstated needs or wishes. If you're not paying attention, you are not going to notice when someone's body language changes, when their tone changes, when their complexion changes. You're just not going to be on top of it. So we don't want to be overly involved. We don't want to get enmeshed. We don't want to be under-involved. We don't want to miss things by a lack of awareness. So there's a just right zone. We call that the Goldilocks zone. That's maintaining professional boundaries and considering ethics when making decisions regarding care. Developing limits around expectations and outcomes. We're here to support change and growth, not force it. Nicknames. Nicknames and endearments suggest familiar relationship rather than a professional one. They can also help folks feel welcome. Be sure you're honoring the person's autonomy and right to choose. Ask the person how they would like to be addressed. There is a power dynamic here. Someone might have some feelings about nicknames, but are too shy or traumatized to tell you. You are the person in authority and might not feel strong, and they might not feel strong or powerful enough to address it or set a limit. They might be intimidated. Oversharing. It's fun to tell stories. It's fun to share your experiences. It really helps sometimes create some alignment or rapport with a person that we serve. But oversharing can be problematic. Oversharing your personal stories can put added pressure on the person you are supporting. They may feel obligated or helpless to support you, especially if you're oversharing a difficulty, adding to their own distress and potential harm. It's tempting to share stories and anecdotes, and they serve a purpose, but it can be a slippery slope. When in doubt, don't share. When considering the value of sharing, ask yourself, do they want to hear this story? Do I have the right to tell it? Will sharing resolve something for me, or is there a nugget of wisdom or humor that might strengthen the alignment and rapport with this person that I'm working with? We're going to talk about touch. Touch is a complicated thing when you are serving people in a professional manner. So let's talk about it. Touch can be helpful. Touch can be harmful. Many people have a complicated relationship with touch. We never want our touch to be confusing. Remember to ask yourself, what purpose does this serve? Is it resolving something for me or the person I'm supporting? And do they consent to touch? Is it okay to ask the person you're serving if they want a hug? Those are limits that you get to explore with the person that you're serving. And if there's ever any doubt, don't do it. We're going to talk a little bit about gifts, tips and favors. Giving or accepting gifts will always blur the lines and alter the relationship. Because folks that are being served by Vital Villages won't be paying for support or services, they may feel obligated to demonstrate gratitude with gifts. Best policy is to not accept gifts, but sometimes that's not possible. Rule of thumb, if not accepting a gift would cause harm, try not to accept gifts valued at more than $10. If folks persist, ask them to make a donation to a charity on your behalf. Examples of appropriate gifts could include cards, small pieces of art, baked or perishable goods, candy. I like chocolate. Plant cuttings, stones or found objects, something small that has some kind of attachment or shared interest between the two of you. Keeping professional. There are lots of ways that we can demonstrate our professionalism. How we look, act, and present ourselves are just three of them. So consider your appearance. A rule of thumb here is to dress in a manner that appropriately reflects our roles, while also considering the cultural and power dynamics of our position of power in this dynamic. If your appearance is too relaxed, your credibility might come into question. If you're overly dressed, you could be creating an additional barrier to rapport and trust building. Language and tone of voice. Be aware of the place, time, and situation. Tone and volume can communicate many things. Body language, sitting and standing positions can communicate many things as well. Pay attention to posture. Are you communicating openness and acceptance, or are you communicating discomfort or lack of interest? What's your body language telling people? Okay, we're going to get into some of the dilemmas here. Confidentiality versus secrets. Confidentiality is the client's right to have their personal and health information protected. Secrets cross boundaries and can result in abuse, neglect, or harm. So a situation where you might have a situation where a client tells you something and asks you to keep it secret, but maybe it's something that has to be reported. If you have kind of established an expectation where the client or the person you're serving has permission to tell you secrets, they might one day tell you a secret that you have to report and create a rupture in that relationship. So be careful about aligning in an unprofessional way by keeping secrets. How to repair a boundary violation. When something happens and there's a rupture in the relationship with a person you're supporting, or maybe even a colleague, get consultation from a manager or supervisor. Determine if repair is possible or appropriate. If it's appropriate, acknowledge the mistake, apologize, commit to not making that mistake in the future. If it's not possible, the professional relationship is not repairable, you and the person being served may not be able to work together. This should be decided with consultation, and transitions should also be navigated with the support of a supervisor or manager to minimize any additional harm. And these are the resources for this video. You can click on the links or copy and paste into your browser. If you would like further information, please get a hold of Vital Villages and be looking in your emails for the quiz. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that you got a lot out of this. Good luck.